Okay. Hello and welcome to the Shorts Block to talk back for the Imagine This Women's International Film Festival 2022 edition. I'm very excited today to help moderate the Filmmaker talk back for this block. And man, there's a really wonderful films in this section. I really enjoyed watching all of them. And so very quickly, my name is Jessica. I'm the moderator. I had a film in the Shorts Block last year called Drama High. And it's always really wonderful to see what people are creating. So let's go through, I'll call on each person as I see them on my screen, and you can briefly give an introduction of yourself and like what your film is and what it's about. All right. So, okay, the first person I see on my screen is Tatiana.
Hello, everybody. Hi, how are you? My name's Tatiana Yasukovich. I am, right now I'm in Philadelphia, and my film is called Baby Grief. And
Yes.
it's about two women who have had a loss and how they sort of deal with, one of them is very intensely grieving, the other one is not. And it sort of has it's hard to explain, but essentially the one who's been grieving so much allows the other one to grieve at the end. So it's a very short little film. It's 4 minutes long, and I've never made a 4-minute short. So it was fun to do that, to create that. Yeah.
I have some questions about it, so I'm excited to like learn more about it. Because there's so many emotions in that one. I felt very emotional watching it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the amount of emotional work it can do in 4 minutes is quite astounding.
I was astounded too, but I had two fabulous actresses, so I was very lucky. And that really helps, obviously, you know, when you have wonderful actors and they sort of embody the role so wonderfully, and they have a great connection. So I was very lucky in that.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Okay, so the next one is, I see on my screen, is Sarah.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sarabala. I'm from Brussels in Belgium, and my short film was called YANA.
You have another wonderful performance.
Thank you. And it's a story of a 10-year-old girl that is sent on a mission by her mother to go back to their old family home to clean up the attic and metaphorically clean up the shards of the broken marriage, basically. And as she proceeds, she feels quite overwhelmed because she has to take on a lot of tasks that are far beyond her age, as well as grieving the loss of her old life. But then, in the end, she manages to forge a new friendship, and that kind of helps her on her way.
Right. I remember that one was like also very differently emotionally, but really, like I said, like the girl's performance I thought was like really spectacular. Her name like Hasse?
Yes, Hasse Huygens. Yes.
Yeah.
She was amazing. She was so concentrated from morning till evening every day. It was very nice working with her.
Yeah, because I feel like child actors are always a hit or miss. I feel like sometimes.
Definitely, yeah.
Anyway, the last person here is Kaya. Why don't you introduce yourself and your film?
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Kaya Tone. My film is called The Call of Water, and it's a semi-coming-of-age fantasy film about a young girl, Nadia, who accidentally opens a portal into the astral plane and has to sort of confront the spirit of the land that's there. So it's sort of an environmental film. It's like 20 minutes, but a lot of fantasy aspects. But it was a really fun one to make. I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, I definitely saw like the fantasy elements with like the horned one and things like this.
Yeah, the creatures.
Yeah, and so obviously you have three very different films right now being represented in terms of this tone, but also subject matter and stuff. Although three very emotional in different ways, kind of, they all tap into the emotions. And so I was wondering, what was the inspiration behind your films, or like what caused you to write these things? Or
Ironically, for me, I had created this piece from a section of a feature film I was making, and the feature film I was supposed to make in June 2020.
Uh-oh.
But unfortunately, we had a pandemic. And so I was sort of, I was all set to go. I had sort of a script, I had an AD, I'd broken down everything. And this little piece had been a way to showcase for people to fund the movie. And I created this relationship. It's about quite a lot of different characters who live in this community. And their specific storyline was very much about this moment in their life. So when I created it and I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, this could be a really good little short film, because it really does have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I was interested to make films in a short period of time, but to have a whole story happen within that time. So as I watched it, I thought, actually, I can create this into a short film. Since I can't do my feature, this will be the film that I'll have done this year, because obviously it was so hard to make films in 2020 because everyone was, so I was mostly writing. So it came out of that. And so I put it together, and then I decided to submit it to festivals, just, you know, because I felt that it deserved a sort of essentially. So that's how it came about for me.
I think it's like, I feel like this is one of those opportunities that we should acknowledge, that for everyone for making films during the pandemic, it's like a very tough thing to do. So really wonderful that you were able to put together this version of the film, even if it wasn't the feature version.
Yes.
Yeah. How about Sarah and Kaya? Like, what was the inspiration behind your film?
So I wanted to come back to making a fiction short film, which I hadn't made one in a very long time. And basically I wanted to make one to see if it still made me happy. To make,
what were you doing before? Or like, what were you transitioning from?
Well, I had made my last short fiction film is from 2000, so the one before this one. And in between, I've made everything from reports to documentaries to music videos, all sorts of things, but not fiction. And so I wanted to try my hand at it again and see if it, because I feel there's a lot of pressure working on fiction film sets. And I just wanted to test myself and see if it could make me happy again. And actually it did. And
that's so good.
Yes. And the inspiration is, it's partly autobiographical. I wanted to see if I could make a story interesting that was essentially quite slow. And although there's emotional things happening, there's not like huge conflict or it's not very, very plot driven. So I wanted to test and see what I could do and just try my hand at that. And also I wanted to bring in some magical realism, which is something I'm fond of.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like there were a lot of really wonderful, beautiful kind of quiet moments in YANA. And like, it definitely felt, I also appreciated how it was shot, because I noticed that sometimes some of the shots were shot with certain angles where it definitely felt like a kid's point of view. And I thought that was really nice.
Oh, that's so cool that you noticed. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I thought it was like really cool to see such a quiet story being made, and that makes sense, because I feel like a lot of times people do like push for plot driven things, even though internal conflict can be just as compelling, you know. But how did you decide to address it visually if it was like mostly internal?
Well, so I had to like these magical realism moments where things were happening in the house. I wanted the house where she was at to be also a character. And so the house speaks to YANA and to the audience and has its own story to tell. And even if you know, it's not very literal, you don't exactly know what happened there, you kind of feel the house and you feel how YANA feels about the house. And it's as if the walls could speak, if you want. And we also tried for YANA to have some internal dialogue externalized, but actually that didn't work. So so we went for very little dialogue, and there's only dialogue when she actually speaks to other people, except for one point where she makes a major discovery. yeah, so and then from a cinematic point of view, I actually stole a bit from Krzysztof Kieślowski, who was a Eastern European director that I like a lot, and Gus Van Sant. I watched the movie Elephant, I think it was called, about the high school shooting, and I kind of let myself be inspired by how they went about it.
Very cool. What about Kaya?
Yeah, this one for me, it was supposed to be my senior thesis through school. So for me, I wanted to sort of wrap up a lot of the things that I had learned, and in that sort of make a homage to where I'm from. So we actually filmed the whole thing at my house in my home in Boulder, Colorado. So that's sort of like what started the whole thing, and it was me sort of putting my own mythology on some of like the ideas and myths and stories that I was told about the place I'm from and like the land there, and putting my own interpretation and spin, and fantasizing those stories a little bit. But that's sort of where it stemmed from. And then the sister relationship is like semi-autobiographical, sort of based on me and my sister. So it was really fun, but it was a pandemic film. We were supposed to film it in March and we had to push it back quite a bit. But you know, it always was based around the land where it came from. And yeah, so that's sort of where the whole inspiration.
I mean, I think in terms of like, I was very curious about like how you decided to what figured into design of like the horned one, and like what does he represent to you? Is he based on, you mentioned like mythology surrounding Boulder, so like was he based on something, or did you create that yourself? A little bit.
I sort of created him, but he is loosely based on Cernunnos, which is sort of like the Irish Pan. So he's a nature god, of like death and rebirth and nature. And he was sort of described as a blue man with horns, but I added like the skull mask, and me and my sister really collaborated, who was my production designer. We really collaborated on what he should look like and like the symbols that he should wear, and sort of created our own mythology based on that. But the mythology of Boulder is, there's this legend of a curse of Niwot, which is that everyone who has ever come to Boulder, once you come, you can never leave. You're stuck there. And by being stuck there, you will eventually destroy the beauty of the nature that's there. That's sort of Niwot's curse. So that's the story of what Nadia is sort of internally dealing with, and her friends are sort of talking about. But it's a pretty subtle mythology that's in there, while the creature and the horned one is based on some of these like different interpretations of Pan, basically, and nature spirits. So yeah.
That the whole like you can never leave thing, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, it's
like really intense.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense old thing that me and my friends still talk about, the curse of Niwot. You can't leave. But
well, I think that I think you probably can all agree that a lot of the emotional weight is carried very heavily by the actors who were cast in the film, in addition to like the strong writing and everything. And I was like really curious, like how did you guys find your actors, and like how did you like direct them into the way that you felt could convey your message the best?
I actually did some workshops with many young people, and I knew Hasse from a workshop I'd done previously, and I kind of had her in mind, but I wasn't entirely sure. So we did the workshops and did some scenes and had a lot of fun with quite a few children. And in the end, I decided that I really wanted to work with her, and I found the girl that plays her friend through the workshop as well. And then the little boy is my son. But I knew he could play, so I knew he would pull it off. And so, yeah, that's how I forgot the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
Like, how did you direct them so that?
Oh, right. So actually, I did a very Ken Loach kind of approach in the sense that I had her parents read the script so that they would know what they were letting her do, and see if they agreed. But we didn't give her a script, and so actually every morning I just kind of told her what we were going to shoot, and for the most part we shot it chronologically, so she could kind of follow along. And yeah, she was so concentrated and also so unaware of herself that it worked beautifully like that with her. With the girl that played her friend, it was a bit more challenging, and I think that with her maybe it would have been better if we had rehearsed the scene. But yeah, it just kind of depends on the actor, and it was a bit of a gamble. But yeah, I'm happy that in the end it worked out, and all three of them performed really beautifully.
Like, that sounds like so much improv, I guess. It sounds like a lot of like letting things happen.
Well, no, I kind of had a pretty good idea in my head of what I wanted, and I think because I've shot a lot of reports and documentaries, I've kind of taught myself to kind of like edit on set as well. But I'd also really prepared it very well, so I knew where I wanted to go. But of course, I didn't know exactly how she was going to play it. But yeah, I had a pretty good feeling, and I feel like directing is a lot of discovering and then choosing what you want to happen more than pushing for things to happen, if that makes sense.
Yes, it really does. Do Tatiana or Kaya want to talk about?
For me, the reason I started filmmaking was actually it sort of fell into me I fell into filmmaking accidentally. I am an actress originally, so I was sort of tired at a certain age that I recognized that there were characters that were not being written for women in their 40s and 50s. So I literally, all the films I've made, I've created the character based on the actor or what I know them to be, or how I sort of connect with them in some way, and I develop a character around what I imagine they can play. So for me, when I go into directing, I've written the character for them, so it's almost tailor-made for the actor in some ways. And I use the same actors a lot for most of my films, and I don't audition, just because I feel that the language as the writer and the director and the actor all sort of becomes one, and it's this sort of incredible collaboration. And so I'm just sort of if they do a take, I'm literally helping them to go in a different direction or maybe make another choice. But it's such an easy dialogue between the actors that it's actually a really easy job for me. And I think as an actor, I know that there's certain things as a director you can't say, because it will go against an actor's natural sort of impulse or instinct. So I feel as the writer, once it becomes, the film becomes, and then once I go into the editing room, it's sort of, you retell the story through that. So I'm very lucky that I have this wonderful actors surrounding me. So I get to choose wonderful actors.
I mean, like we mentioned before, there's like a ton of emotion packed into 4 minutes. And so I was like wondering what decisions you made to push those emotions or convey those emotions.
I mean, if a lot of it is a dialogue before we'll be on the phone, and then it's kind of like, I just trust that they're going to know where to go. And then I just sort of help them to get to that place. It's almost as if I sort of put a lot of trust and faith that once we've discussed how the character is going to move through the scene, and I don't demand that they cry, or that I don't demand that they laugh at certain moments. I just trust intuitively they'll find their way. And then if I see something about to happen, I'll just encourage it to go further. So it's this sort of wonderful, it's like an orchestra, it's like music. They're already sort of so open and ready and willing to be in this experience. I think there's a lot of trust. So for me, I need to have that with the actor. And I think it's very helpful when you work with people a lot. I know there are a lot of filmmakers who use the same actors, and I think there is a reason for that. because then you can build this sort of relationship and this dialogue, and certain actors want certain things, other actors want other things, and I kind of just learn, and I'm sort of in tune with them as much as I can be. And I think that's a big part of it. I trust that they will go to where I need them to go. And sometimes they go somewhere in a totally different direction, and it's even more interesting than what I imagined. And that's the beauty of it, the collaborative experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you collaborate, I think that's like often like one of the best parts of working with someone else, you know?
It's so fun. Yeah.
And like I want to briefly take a slight turn because Ripon is here. And so we should have thank you so much for joining us. And please, why don't you introduce yourself in your film briefly?
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Ripon Cinder. I'm the writer, director behind a movie called Broken Drawer, and it deals with the grief and how we process grief, and just what that looks like when we have to move on, and what it looks like to let go. It's grounded in a powerful Black and brown friendship, and yeah, that's my film.
What was the inspiration behind it? Because I do remember watching it and said it's based on an actual incident.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called Fresno, California, and I'm really inspired by, my culture as a South Asian woman, and in particular, dealing with the death of my own mother and being vulnerable in that space, and being able to look at, when a crime kind of not just happens, but it sucks the life out of you as a person. How do you take that grief and then be able to rebuild your life in ways? And so for me, it was based off of a very true incident. It was the death of my mother, and also having had a liquor store when we were younger and experiencing some trauma and what that looked like in the pain of that. And I was inspired. To write something that felt really real and raw, and often not really talked about openly in an art form.
Right. I felt like yours is definitely dealing a lot with like trauma and how to process trauma. Did you have any like thoughts about how people can deal with that in like a healthy manner?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to care for mental health a very, in a very safe way, because I think often to speak on it, you really have to be tender with it in certain ways. I wanted to be careful. What does it look like? It doesn't show up in all these different forms, and it's not often loud. And so I also wanted to just really show that it's okay to be vulnerable, and to have a brown male lead really defy the stereotypes of masculine, toxic masculinity. It was important to me. And so I did a lot of research around it. I asked a lot of people, how can we show this in a way? And having gone through my own experience of dealing with death, it shows up in a lot of different ways. And so I always just encourage people, like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to go and seek help for it, and to find spaces where you're going to be in ups and, there's highs and lows. And remnants of death and grief can come back in really sudden and unexpected ways in your life. And so there's a lot of different resources out there, and just really holding space for that has been a very healing experience for me with this film.
I think it's really wonderful that you can use the film to like kind of process that more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Kaya is still there, but I wanted to also ask everyone like what you guys, I feel like for a few of these locations, obviously a really huge aspect, right? Like for example, with Sarah's, I was really curious about whether you wrote with the house in mind already, or like, did you find the house to fit the script? Because I was wondering about that. And also for like Kaya's in the Call of Water, I was like really curious about like the fact that she filmed in her actual home and like had that sister connection there. It all sounds like location was a great fuel for creativity as well. And so I was like curious how you guys felt about that and how you like dealt with finding locations for your film.
Well, I had a very clear picture in my head of how I wanted the attic to look like. And when I was starting to look for locations, that was my most important, the most important thing that I wanted to be right. And then I had found the perfect house to film it in, but the owners, it was empty, so it was perfect. But the owners didn't want to give me permission to film there, unfortunately. And so after grieving over that, I found the house where we filmed it in. And the owners were so nice about it and so friendly. And actually, I think in hindsight, it was even better. And it kind of influenced the script a little, because I rewrote some scenes once I knew what the house was exactly. And the fact that we had the garden and things like that. And so, yeah, so it really was not just a character, but maybe even an actor. And I had to deal with the house as if I were dealing with an actor. And as Tatiana said, so spoke about it so well, about the collaboration and the trust. And yeah, maybe we can project it on the house as well.
Yeah, I also, Kaya's still there, but like, would love to hear about your experience filming in your home, or your childhood home. There. Not, I'm also, the last question I also have before we wrap up in that half-hour segment is, I wanted to know what you guys had, if you guys had future plans for your projects, or what you guys might be doing next.
I'm actually just finishing up. I did manage to shoot a film in the later part of the pandemic, and I shot it in 6 sections, and it's about theater actors dealing with being in isolation during the pandemic, and how do they find ways to express themselves. And because there's one character who's actually, the 2 that were in Baby Grief will be in that movie too, but there's one character who does a 1-person show of King Lear on Zoom. And it's just, it's called Ghostlight, which also refers to the idea that there's always a light on stage when there's no theater in the dark. And since I'm a theater actress, a lot of my films are also based on the world of theater and the behind the scenes of that. So I'm literally doing the final edit, and then it'll go into color, and then it'll be ready to go. It's my first feature.
So exciting. Congratulations.
Excited. I think it's kind of unusual. And talk about locations, because, you know, I literally had to have a very small crew, and I used one house. I had 2 different rooms, or 3 different characters in that house.
Oh, yes.
In my house, I had 2 different characters living in this house. I turned my son's house into a New York apartment, and his room a New York apartment. I mean, it was so fun. I love doing a lot of the art direction and costuming. That's one of the things I love doing as a filmmaker. So that I'm very
most of locations, very important for the indie filmmaking.
So they're all free so far. So it's great. Thank you for asking. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, hopefully we can see the results soon.
I hope so too.
Any other future plans or things you want to do with the particular projects that have been in the festival?
The next step for me in fiction anyway is that I'm writing a script for a feature for a young audience. So I'm currently looking for a producer. So here in Belgium, we have a film fund, and you can ask them for funding for writing your script. And I pitched, and that was okay. So I now need to take the next steps in that process to get the funding. And yeah, so hopefully in a year or so, we can think about producing it.
Fingers crossed for you. It sounds exciting. Like the first steps are there. What about other future plans? Or
yeah, I'll jump in here. So right now I'm in the trenches of pitching a TV show, and that I'm really excited about. And so yeah, we're going out to market with it. It's about brown culture meeting the urban world, set in Oakland. So I'm just super jazzed about that. And then also looking to expand Broken Drawer.
Oh, nice. I feel like I need to talk to you about that, because I'm trying to also pitch a TV show.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Kaya? What are your future plans? Also, if you want to speak more about the call of water, because I feel like you're
Sure.
in and out and I feel bad.
I know, I'm sorry, my internet's like terrible, but yeah, going in and out. But yeah, future plans, I'll touch on that real quick, but I'm writing a lot right now. That's mainly what I'm trying to focus on. Yay, yeah. So sort of expanding like a prequel to the Call of Water is one thing, which is sort of interesting, sort of about like the parents that go to the land first, before Nadia is born, and like the origin of the horned one. So that whole fun. So that
building that mythology.
Yeah, building on the mythology, exactly. And then just doing like a couple of features and TV shows, just trying to like build as much stuff as possible. I have too many odysseys that I want to tell, so trying to write them all down. So yeah,
You know,
that's like
honestly, I have a thought. Like with your Horn One mythology stuff, yours might be really interesting if adapted into a graphic novel first.
Sorry, say that one more time.
I think from like what you're saying about like the Horn One and stuff, actually, I feel like a lot of it would be really interesting if it was adapted as like a graphic novel first.
Yeah, I would love that. My sister, who's my production designer, is a graphic novelist, so maybe I can drag her into that. She might get into that.
Yeah, that were like scripted podcasts, because those are a lot of easy ways to get from like one medium to. It's easier to go from one medium to the next and reverse engineer the IP that way.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's great.
We can all talk about that stuff.
Yes.
Like, because that stuff is like things I'm always interested in, like how to push stories into different mediums and stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess like towards some of your other questions that I missed. But
I was like, oh no, she doesn't get a chance to talk. I feel bad.
No, it's okay. The internet's just going in and out all the time. But yeah, like for me, my actors, first of all, my main actress, Trinity Simpson, she just happens to be my cousin. We went through the whole audition process. Yeah, it was crazy. But I sort of like always wrote thinking like she'd be good as this because she knows where I'm from. She knows that area. She's from Denver. She's local. And
she's also great. She's really wonderful in it.
She's amazing. Yeah, she's an incredible actress. And so that was really fun to have her be that actress. Because we just already have such a rapport. And I think like what everyone else was talking about is key for me too. Every one of those actors I knew and was friends with. A lot of them were crew members because it was COVID. So they doubled up. Like the guy that plays Brett, which is like her friend, he was my assistant director. So it was like everyone sort of doubled up a little bit because it was COVID. We didn't want to have too many people. But yeah, so that was a really fun thing to already have a rapport with everybody. And I think for me, when I'm working on characters, is I really just want to create a background for the characters. I don't really focus so much on like the script itself. Like I have them read it, I have them memorize it or whatever, but I'm more like, if you know where you're coming from as the character, you'll figure it out there, and we can direct the minuteness when it happens. But it's a lot of like, for me, relationship was a big thing in this film because the sister relationship, the friend relationship. So for me, it was about developing those inner friend workings, making sure those felt authentic. Even if they didn't all necessarily know each other, they all knew me. So I was like, okay, well, we'll try to create a friendship ring around that. So that was really fun. And developing it with Trinity was really fun. Just doing a lot of improv beforehand and rehearsals like that. It was interesting. The sister character, Trish, was actually an understudy because we were trying to make it a SAG production. And we had a different actress who was SAG as the Trish character. And I had her as a backup just in case we weren't going to get approved in time with all the COVID stuff.
Very smart.
Yeah, so I was like, we'll have just in case. And she actually was incredible. Again, very local Colorado girl, but great actress. And her and Trinity really clicked, and I think that was extremely important. Yeah. So they were like really friends on set, which was great. I couldn't have asked for better, so that worked out really well. So yeah, just catching up on those questions.
Yeah, well, is there anything anyone else wants to say or like talk about their film briefly? If not, then
just thank you for having our films in your festival.
Yeah,
of
thank
course.
you.
It's been a great honor watching all of them, and it's been really cool to see everyone's creation.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that and say, like, thank you for not just programming them, but for creating real space. Like it can become a very isolating craft sometimes when you're doing it. And to be able to be in community is not only inspirational, but real motivation, especially as a woman and a person of color, to keep going.
Especially in the filmmaking space.
Yes, and I've really enjoyed talking to all women for this.
Yes. Yes. And
Thank
also,
you.
like, if you guys haven't, I highly encourage you guys watching each other's shorts because they're all very interesting. Very different from each other, but interesting in wonderful ways.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Bye.
I'm glad you guys had a good time.